Well, I did it. Hey folks, this is my 1996 Toyota Supra. It's right-hand drive. I imported it myself from Japan, went to auction, did all of that, and I will cover that in another video, start to finish, how to import a Japanese car. I couldn't be more excited. I mean, the car itself is pretty cool. It's a Series 2, so in May of 1996, this is a June of 1996 car. Starting in May, they updated certain things like the headlights, some interior bits, the tail lights, and people typically swap the Series 2 parts onto the Series 1 cars if they don't have them. This is a Japanese hero car. It's a hero of its day. I mean, you're thinking the FD-RX-7, the Nissan GT-R, this car, the 3000 GT is kind of another one that falls into that category, but is talked about less. Just really, really, really neat car. The car itself was stock when I bought it. I actually already shot this video once. It's a whole thing. I shot a bunch of content, didn't know the camera was having problems, and lost a bunch of audio, just completely blown away. So we're doing it all over again, and we're gonna cover exactly what's going on with this car. So the reason that these cars are such legends was when it was built, a ton of engineering had gone into the 2JZ that's under the hood. This is a 2JZ GE, the naturally aspirated variant of the motor. And we'll pop the hood and take a quick look at it. But there was tons of development from the M series into the J series, the 1JZ, and then the 2JZ. There was a ton of really good engineering into what is a really stout block with, you know, just really great components that handle boost from the factory when this is a twin turbo version. This happens to be an NA 5-speed version, the W58 5-speed transmission, but can handle lots of boost, and even the NA variants can, if you reduce the compression a little bit, handle boost without much work. And that's these tunability of these cars is what made them, you know, legendary. Now, this NA Supra, while it is only NA, is exciting to me because in my price range, I was having a really hard time here in the States finding anything that wasn't an automatic that hadn't been totaled. I was actually talking to an individual for $10,000 more than I paid for this for an auto white NA that had been hit in the rear, and I just couldn't do it because it hadn't been reconstructed that well. So this one happens to be clean history. I got the history from the auction house, the best that they could get it. It's also got a pretty rare color on it. So this is Moonstone Pearl Effect. There were about 1,500 Supras produced in this color. So it's a pretty unique color. You typically will see white or black or silver, red. Like those are kind of the main colors. There's also in early and late years, there are some cool like blues and greens that are pretty rare. And this itself happens to be a very rare color. Also, as I said, just to get a Supra with an NA2J and a manual transmission, not super easy or super cheap these days. The prices are pretty high. So finding something like this in my price range, bidding on it and winning just makes it that much sweeter. And while it's easy to complain about how expensive a Supra is today, the base price on a Supra, and the reason why not so many of these sold overall, was about $33,000 in 1996, which adjusted for inflation is over $60,000 today. For you're talking about a touring coupe that gets okay gas mileage, is somewhat comfortable, and a 5-speed, right? Like it's a great chassis and it's well balanced, but that's a lot of money for a Toyota, and people just weren't quite buying them for that much back in the day. Let's get a little bit closer and talk about the styling, because that's obviously the highlight of this car. So the classic 90s styling of a Mark IV Supra starts in the front, right? The front bumper is super distinct, big swoops in the front to do some air intake, big swoops and a bar in the front bumper, super cool. And as I mentioned, this is a Series 2 car, right? So we've got our black headlights. They're a lot cleaner looking than the Series 1. The Series 1 also have an additional bubble inside for a daytime running light that's been moved to the outside on the Series 2 cars. Dual projectors, which is nice in here. So overall, a really nice high quality headlight. And the front of the car is just super classic, right? Anytime you see a Mark IV Supra and you just see kind of the lines that come up the body, it's super cool. So super distinct, really neat, just classic 90s styling. This car came with the factory 5-spoke alloy wheels. One of the few mods I've done since I've had it, since I've lost the footage, was suspension, so HKS suspension, and the BBS LMs that you would see on my wall in a lot of other videos that I shoot, and just some spacers to get them to fit for now. And they fit great, I'm really happy with it. But speaking to the factory stuff, it was very comfortable, very good ride. The alloy wheels in the 90s was like actually a nice option. It was a nice wheel to have. They were only 16s, I think the turbos came with 17s. But yeah, they had to go. I had to get something aftermarket and fun on the car, but factory, very nice. And then again, we're talking about 90s styling. Coming up the side of the car, you get to the kind of rear and side skirt area, the rear quarter, and you see these massive air scoops, which are actually used for cooling. There is actual air pass through there. So super, super neat stuff, super classic styling right up the side of the car. And as you come towards the rear, which we'll check out in a second, you see the big, big hips. I mean, I'm gonna take a shot just straight down the side of this car, and you'll see that these things just bulge. It's crazy, and it's super cool in your rear view mirror when you're looking down back it. All you can see is just huge rear fender. It's awesome. It's just such a cool nostalgia, like 90s look with a big bubble rear fender. Absolutely love it. And here we are at the rear of the car. So you've got the classic 90s Supra logo, which is super cool. It's like an italic kind of script thing going on, which is just so mid-90s. The taillights, classic, you know, they called like similar Altezza, which came off the Toyota Altezza taillights, like a clear style with these 4 bubbles, super distinct. You would see taillights like this on other makes and models. I remember seeing them a ton on like Honda Civics, Mazda Proteges, things like that back in the day, just like kind of similar style headlights because they were so popular. And you can't talk about the back of this car without noticing the giant wing. I love it, right? It's, if you ever wanted a Supra, if you were a big fanboy of them, since I was a kid, you would totally dig this too. It's just classic, perfect Supra styling. And like I mentioned, if you can see just down the side here is this super big body line right up from the rear of the car to the front. So that is super, super cool. And while we're back here, let's take a quick look in the trunk. Just to show, it's really neat, this design of this taillight in the trunk here. You pop it just by putting your key inside of the taillight where that little receptacle is, which is super cool. It's just like a really nice detail, and it shows how much thought was put into building this car. So here's the rear trunk on the Supra. It's cool because it's a hatch, right? So that came, if you look at my old Celica videos, that's a hatch. That's where the styling was taken from, was the Celica GT hatchback into the Celica Supra, into the Supra, right? So that's carried forward design language-wise right here, which is super neat. One thing I love about this is the privacy screen. So I actually couldn't figure this out when I first got the car. It took me a second, but there's a privacy screen. These go back up in, you can take this out. It's an optional part. I think the Targas might've been set up a little bit differently because that top is stored back here. But super neat to keep your things hidden, which is convenient for me because I've got a bunch of, as you can see right now, I've got all of my shooting equipment, backpack with a laptop, and then all of my detailing equipment, right? So it's nice to have all that stuff covered. There's not too much room for shenanigans back here. I just went to Grid Life, I camped there, a buddy brought his Cayenne down and had to take most of my stuff. I can fit like sleeping bag, backpack, that sort of thing, drinks, but I cannot fit like a full-size tent or the grill that we brought down. There's just no way you're doing that, even with the seat folded down. I don't think it's happening. So great, like I said, touring car, totally feels like a touring car. You've got enough to keep you for the weekend, but that's about it. And that's the whole trunk. So here we've got a big part of the why these Toyota Supras are famous. It's the 2JZ GE engine that's in this model, right? So there's a GTE, the T in that engine code, you know, is to state that it has a turbocharger on it. This is kind of cool because it's an in-between car, so it's a Series 2, but it's not late enough to have a VVTi engine, which takes a little bit more work to turbocharge, and my understanding is they're not as stout power-wise. So getting an earlier non-vvti 2JZ GE sets me up theoretically a little bit better to go to a big single turbo, which is the plan for this car. Behind this engine is the W58 5-speed gearbox, renowned for not holding a ton of power, especially when you're talking, you know, big Toyota Supra power numbers, right? So there's a couple different ways you can go. You can go to the R154. You can also do, there's a Grannis is a company that makes aftermarket boxes for these, transmissions for these, and that's probably the direction that I'll go. You might as well just have it built and be comfortable with it. But that's a long way down the road, right? The current W58 feels great behind this. This produces about 220 horsepower and I think about 230 foot-pounds of torque. It is kind of cool. This car has power up in the revs where you wouldn't expect it, especially for a non-vvti car. There must be some sort of thing going on with the camshaft profile that's just, when you get to those RPMs, it really does come alive. It makes a ton of induction noise, and you'll hear that when we go to drive it. So it's really, really neat, really, really cool engine, really tight, good transmission for what power we're making currently. Let's check out the inside. It's a sunnier day, so it's a little bit harder to see, but here we have the interior of the Mark IV Supra, kind of the initial front driver, in this case it's right-hand drive, seating position. You've got all of your gauges up here, which are pretty nice looking. They're very 90s. They're not overly styled or anything, which is kind of nice. There's a factory kind of HVAC system, vents over here. This is kind of a cool button that I'll show in a second. It folds your mirrors in, mirror adjustment, key, different lighting adjustment. So you'll notice just everything is angled at the driver. That's definitely something that gets mentioned about this car a lot and is absolutely true, is that when you're in this up front seating position, the entire car is about you. It's there for you to respond to you, and I really think that's like added to people's kind of love and mystique of the car. Even if you look here at the glove box, which has a bunch of crap in it right now, but it's literally angled just at the driver. The passenger can't even use it. This is technically a 2x2 car, so you can see we can fold the seat forward. There are seats back here. They barely fit me, and I am 5'5" on a good day. So yeah, technically you can use the back seats. They're not too good for too much, but let's kind of sit in the car, talk about it, and get going. So the initial sitting and seating position in the Supra is so nice. You're just, like I mentioned when we kind of took a look at it, everything's angled at you. So I've got all the information, RPMs, speed, voltage, temps, like all that stuff, and it's angled right at me. Everything's right at me. All the adjustment for HVAC, all that stuff is right here, right at my fingertips. Really good setup. Surprisingly good visibility. Aside from the Supra wing in your mirror, you can see pretty well out of this thing at all angles. The only hard thing to spot is typically when you're taking a left turn in America and you're looking out the left window, it's easier to see. From here, I've got basically the rear pillar of the car along with the passenger seat and anything else in the way. It can be really hard to see left turns, so that's something to keep in mind when you're sitting in a right-hand drive car. This also has technically some sort of OBD system. I don't know if it's full OBD2 because it's Japanese in 96, but it does have a check engine light along with some warning lights up here. And on the Series 1 models, you'll have your odometer reading outside of the cluster, but in mine, it's right inside the cluster because it's a Series 2. So, you know, shifter position, all really good. Emergency brake, like everything you need to get going is right here. Completely good to go. So what we're going to do now is take it for a drive and just talk through how it feels, how it's balanced, that sort of stuff. All right, so I mean, on startup, it just feels like, oh, that's right. One thing I should cover is that this still has the Japanese radio in it, which has their ETC card reader system. It's like Japan's tolling system. Of course, they were way ahead of us when it came to like the Easy Pass type concept, and they have that hooked right into their radios and their GPSs, which is really cool. This radio usually just thinks I'm like driving offshore somewhere. It's pretty wild. It's not set up to be used here in America. I do have a radio to go in it. I got it hooked up using Google Translate to Bluetooth on my phone, and I've just been blasting music. But overall, you know, we're just pulling out. There was a dirt lot, and the car is now lowered and on wheels and tires, so just being a little bit careful. Overall, the car feels really well balanced. It's very comfortable in here. I mean, I just turned on the AC. The AC is ice cold, which is awesome. And not what I would expect from something that's, you know, 30 years old. It's been, this car itself, like this particular model, has been really well cared for. This individual Supra, really well cared for. Whoever had it really liked this car, and did their best to look after it. So the 5-speed transmission feels really good. It's not, this one in particular doesn't want first gear unless you're close to a stop. but it does well with pretty much everything. I mean, it's notchy, the throws aren't too long, it feels pretty comfortable while you're driving it. And you know, one thing I think that gets lost when people talk about these cars, they're always focused on massive power and getting, you know, tons of horsepower, big turbo noises. And yeah, a lot of that stuff is fun. But this chassis is also, it's balanced, it's comfortable. You don't feel, in its factory state, it's not loud, it's not miserable, it's not noisy, and you never feel unsafe. Like, one of my favorite things to do is merge in this car because the gears are really short. The car itself tops out around 115 miles an hour, which I haven't done. You can just tell from the gearing and kind of where it winds up in fifth gear. But it just goes really, really well. And when you're getting onto the highway, you trust it. You trust it around those tight entrance corners. You can really push the car and, you know, not freak out, which is neat. It's not what you would expect from maybe a car this size that everybody talks about big horsepower with. As far as seating position goes, I like to sit a little bit, you know, I'm not leaned all the way back. I like to be able to see. You get your nice like hood look out here, out the back, like I mentioned. I can see pretty well, but you also just see the big spoiler daunting out back, which is kind of cool. Overall, really nice car to drive. Like, I'm sitting here comfortable, quiet. I can put on some music and relax and not really stress it. You know, you do have to get, with it being right-hand drive, you have to get used to the signals being over here. It's like a common thing for guys with right-hand drive cars that just got them to accidentally turn on their wipers. It's kind of like an ongoing joke. But yeah, it's just a really, this happens to be a really, really brilliant car and really enjoyable to drive. And the other thing people talk about with these is, like, when they're talking about going big turbo, does the NA Supra feel less than? Does it feel like it should be faster or it should be different? It really, really doesn't. It doesn't feel necessarily that it needs a turbo. It just feels like a different car. This is not a turbocharged car. There is no big, I've seen and been in turbo Supras, and the factory turbos have that like 90s lag to them. Like, if you've been in a 90s 911 turbo, also lag, like you're waiting for it and then it comes on super strong. It's like a classic kind of attribute of those older turbo cars and older turbo technology before they had like variable inlets and things like that. That was really common, and that's what that car feels like. This car, it just feels happy and revvy, even with, like I said, it's a non-vvti car, and we're going to get on the highway here in a second, and I'll show you, the induction noise in this car is great. They say that the heads flow better on the NA models because they're not turbocharged, because they're a little bit higher compression. They were built to flow a little bit better. It's just really enjoyable. There's that induction noise that I'm talking about. And like I said, that doesn't feel like, would it be fun with a turbo? Of course, but does it feel less than a turbo? No, it just feels like an NA Supra. It feels like its own car with its, you know, kind of own pluses and minuses. And here we're gonna go merging on the highway is one of my favorite things. I don't typically rev out down low. I usually just cruise, like getting on the highway and just listen. Do you hear that induction noise right around 5,000 RPMs? It's just great induction noise. And right there, this is a 55 and we are going 60. The gearing is so low on this car that everything is kind of geared for, I don't know if it's the US models were the same. I haven't driven a US NA model, but I know that in Japan the highway speeds are a little bit slower. So my impression is these models, especially for the 90s, were geared intentionally lower. And it just makes it so fun. You can just rev it and play with it and have fun and feel like when you, especially when you rev out like fourth gear getting onto a fast highway, you feel like you're going 130, 140 miles an hour, you're going 70 or 80. It's just a pretty neat thing. The only obnoxious thing is long highway trips, you're kind of sitting in higher RPMs, like 3,500, 3,800 RPMs at 75 miles an hour, maybe isn't the best. But overall, the Supra, it's comfortable. It's a real, I feel like it's a real driver's car, a real touring car, and it lives up to the legend. It really is worth the hype. I finally was able to make it happen. I couldn't be more excited about this car. I absolutely love it. But yeah, we're gonna keep modifying it, keep updating it, doing some fun things to it. I'll go back and redo the suspension video. I lost that. But tune in if you want to see a Supra go from stock to wheels, tires, exhaust, and then start thinking about turbo and piggyback and all that stuff. Like, yes, I do want to do it. I don't think I'm necessarily taking away the soul of the car, just kind of building something different. And in the meantime, I mean, you can't not get looks. You're always getting, you know, people are waving, people are excited about it. It is definitely like a well-established legend. So yeah, I'm just gonna go enjoy it and I'll take it back to my shop. Thanks for watching. As always, thank you for watching. Tune in next time as we work on the Supra. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like and a subscribe. It would really help me out.